I always knew my family had its secrets, but I never imagined my own father would turn against me over money. Not just any money, my money. $200,000 I loaned him when he promised it was for a life-saving business deal. But the moment I asked for it back, something in him snapped. Suddenly, I wasn't his daughter anymore, I was a threat. What happened next still makes my hands shake. Because the man who raised me didn't just try to silence me, he planned to destroy me. But he didn't see what I was capable of. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I remember the sound it made when it hit the kitchen tile. It was like everything cracked at once. My trust, my safety, my father's love. Just minutes before, I had asked him, calmly, respectfully, if he had a plan to repay the $200,000 I loaned him last year. And then, without hesitation, he said it. "You're dead to me." Not "I'm sorry." Not "let's talk." Just that. Like I was a stranger who'd crossed some invisible line. I stood there, shaking, trying to process whether I'd just been disowned or threatened. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't just angry I wanted the money back. He was scared, because he knew I had the power to expose everything. And if he could cut me out of his life so easily, what else was he willing to do to shut me up? It's strange how betrayal doesn't always start with a lie. Sometimes it starts with love, with a look, with a favor so wrapped in trust you don't even realize you're being played. That's how it began with my father. Not with a con, not with a threat, just a quiet knock on my apartment door one Sunday morning, and the man I loved most in the world looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. He said he was just in the neighborhood, but I knew that was a lie. My dad never did, just dropping by. He liked appointments, routines, control. That should have been my first sign. But instead, I made him coffee, sat him down, and asked him what was wrong. That's when the story came out. The business, his pride and joy, the one he'd built from the ground up after leaving his corporate job in the late 90s, was in trouble. Not failing, he said, just stretched thin. A few bad deals, some flaky investors, and a silent partner who was threatening to back out. "We just need a cushion," he said. "Something to tide us over for a few months until this new contract kicks in. After that, everything changes." I remember he used that phrase 3 times. After that, everything changes. Like he was trying to hypnotize me with it. Now, here's the thing about my dad. He had this charisma that could fill a room. He could make you believe anything if you listened long enough. He wasn't dramatic, not the yelling type, but he had a gift for making his problems sound noble. Like helping him wasn't just a favor, it was a legacy move, a loyalty test. So when he finally said it, "I hate to ask this of you, Sonia, but you're the only one I trust with something like this," I didn't hesitate. Not because I didn't have questions, not because I didn't feel that little twist of anxiety in my gut, but because in that moment I felt seen, needed. Like I wasn't just his daughter, I was his partner in something bigger. I wired the money that same afternoon. $200,000. No questions asked. No contract. No repayment plan. Just a transfer confirmation and a text from him. "You won't regret this." I believed him. I needed to. Because the alternative, that my father would lie to me, use me, was unthinkable. And for a while I didn't regret it. He started calling more, updating me on the progress. "We're almost there. Just one more hurdle." He even brought up a future role for me in the business, saying it was time I had a real seat at the table. I started imagining a new chapter. Maybe I'd leave my job, go work with him, build something together. A family empire. Something I could pass down someday. But slowly, the call slowed, then stopped. The last time I heard from him that month, he said he was flying to Miami for a big client pitch. After that, silence. No return texts. No updates. Just static. Like someone had yanked the power cord out of our relationship. I tried to be patient. Told myself he was busy. That deals take time. That maybe he just didn't want to worry me. But deep down, a voice had already started whispering. Soft at first, then louder, "You've been played." And you knew at the moment you hit send. At first, I told myself he was just busy. That business takes time, and stress makes people forget to return calls. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks stretched into months, the silence started to feel deliberate. It wasn't just neglect, it was avoidance. I wasn't being left out of the loop. I was being shut out of it entirely. I tried to justify it, like any daughter would. Maybe the deal fell through, and he was embarrassed. Maybe he didn't know how to face me after borrowing that much money. Maybe it wasn't personal. But then I heard from my cousin Anna. She bumped into my dad at a golf club fundraiser, a club he claimed to have stopped paying dues to months ago because things were tight. She told me he looked great, relaxed, even mentioned taking a trip to Spain in the spring with some of the old boys. I laughed it off, but inside I felt like my stomach had dropped through the floor. Spain. He couldn't return my text, but he was planning overseas vacations. The next red flag came during Sunday dinner with my mother. She'd been divorced from him for over a decade, but they still shared mutual friends. Over wine, she casually asked, "So what kind of work are you doing with your father these days? I heard you're helping him turn the company around." I blinked. Helping him? I hadn't heard a word about any help. He hadn't invited me to a single meeting. Not once had he involved me in decisions, just took my money and vanished. I started digging, quietly at first. A few calls to his assistant, voicemail. Then a polite email to the company accountant, just asking for a high-level update for my records. No reply. Then, finally, I did something I hadn't wanted to do. I showed up. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I walked into his office unannounced. The receptionist, new girl, probably didn't recognize me, froze when I said I was his daughter. She stammered something about him being out in a client meeting, but her eyes darted toward a half-closed door behind her. I caught a glimpse. My father, mid-laugh, sipping coffee with a man in a suit. He saw me. I know he did, but he didn't come out. I left before I caused a scene. Sat in my car for 10 full minutes, staring at the building like it had betrayed me. The final crack came a week later. My younger brother, Adam, our family's golden boy, called me out of nowhere. He was oddly tense, choosing every word like he was reading off a legal script. "Hey, Dad says you've been asking around the office. What's going on with you two?" I asked if Dad told him about the loan. Dead silence. "No." I pressed. "He never mentioned the $200,000 I gave him." He sighed. "Look, Sonia, maybe it's not my place, but he's been saying you're acting paranoid, that you're trying to stir things up for no reason." That's when I knew. This wasn't just financial. It was political. He wasn't avoiding me because he felt guilty. He was building a narrative, painting me as unstable, untrustworthy. He was getting ahead of something. And the only reason to do that was if he knew what he was doing was wrong. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for hours that night, replaying every word of his original pitch. The pauses, the tone, the way he'd made it seem like my loyalty was being tested. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been burying for months. What if my own father never intended to pay me back? What if this whole thing was a setup? Because the truth was starting to settle like dust over everything I thought I knew. He didn't forget me. He wasn't too busy. He was hiding from me. There's something surreal about preparing to confront someone you've loved your whole life. It feels like suiting up for battle against your own reflection. Like no matter who wins, you lose something permanent. I rehearsed the conversation for days. Calm, measured, non-accusatory. Just facts. Just dignity. That's what I kept telling myself. But when I finally pulled into the driveway of his house, the same one I grew up in, the one with the creaky porch step and the paint-chipped mailbox, I felt like I was stepping into someone else's memory. My childhood home didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene, and I didn't even know what had been stolen yet. He opened the door like he wasn't surprised to see me. No smile. No warmth. Just that tight, managerial nod he used to give employees running late. "Sonia," he said. "Dad," I replied. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. We sat in the kitchen. Same old chairs. Same table where he used to help me with math homework. Now I was here doing emotional calculus, calculating how many ways this could go wrong. "I'm just going to say it," I started. "I want the money back. The $200,000. It's been almost a year. You said the deal was a short-term fix." He leaned back, arms folded. Didn't blink. "Is this really why you came here? I've tried calling, texting. You're avoiding me." He scoffed. Scoffed. Like I was asking about a missing Tupperware lid. "I'm not avoiding you," he said. "I've been busy, handling actual problems. You don't understand what's at stake." That's the thing, I said. I don't understand. Because you stopped explaining. You stopped treating me like someone you respect. That was when something in his face shifted, like a curtain being yanked open. Respect, he said, voice suddenly sharp. Don't come in here talking about respect when you're acting like a lone shark. You think just because you wrote a check, you get to interrogate me like some debt collector. I didn't write a check, I said quietly. I gave you my savings. I gave you trust. He stood up, pacing now, talking with his hands, just like he used to in board meetings. I didn't force you to give me that money. You offered. Don't rewrite history because you're having regrets. I was stunned, not by the words, but by how prepared he was to say them. This wasn't panic. This was strategy. He'd rehearsed this, probably said it to others, maybe even to himself. I don't want to fight, I said. I just want to understand what happened. And I want to know when you'll repay me. And then he turned, not just physically, but emotionally, like a door slammed shut inside him. You're not getting that money back, he said flatly. And if you try to come after it, you'll regret it. I froze. My heartbeat went still. What does that mean? He leaned in. It means you don't know what you're dealing with. You think you're smarter than me? You think you can just walk in here, demand answers, and walk away clean? You have no idea how fast your life can fall apart. I stood up slowly, hands shaking. Are you threatening me? He didn't answer. Just smiled. That cold, managerial smile. The one he saved for people he didn't respect. I left without another word. Drove in silence. No music. No calls. Just that one sentence on repeat in my mind. You'll regret it. I had come to ask for my money. Instead, I left knowing I'd become the enemy. And that's when I realized he wasn't just unwilling to pay me back. He was willing to destroy me to avoid it. They say family fights are messy. But what happened next wasn't just messy. It was calculated. Precise. Like someone had mapped out exactly how to break me down and was checking each step off a list. It started small, almost like a coincidence. A week after the confrontation, I got a notification that my credit score had dropped nearly 100 points. I figured it was a glitch. I pay everything on time, always have. But when I checked, 3 new accounts had been opened in my name. Maxed out. Delinquent. I called the banks immediately. Fraud. Identity theft. They launched an investigation, said they'd need documents. I submitted everything. Police reports. ID scans. But something about it felt off. Like whoever did this knew just how to stay under the radar. Like they wanted me to be tangled in red tape. Then came the calls for my job. HR flagged an anonymous complaint claiming I'd falsified a client invoice months ago, an invoice I hadn't even worked on. My boss was sympathetic, but firm. It's probably nothing, Sonia, but we have to follow protocol. Suddenly, I was on administrative leave. No paycheck, no protection, just questions. I started losing sleep. I couldn't focus. My inbox was a war zone. Debt collectors, internal investigations, credit alerts. I felt like I was being erased piece by piece, and the scariest part was that I couldn't prove who was behind it. All I had was a gut feeling, and a father who had once promised I wouldn't regret helping him. But it didn't stop there. One afternoon, I got a text from my aunt, the only person in my family still speaking to me at that point. Just saw the post. Are you okay? I had no idea what she meant, until I logged onto Facebook. Someone had created a burner account using my name, my photo, and posted a long, rambling confession claiming I'd stolen money from the family business. They even attached a doctored screenshot of a bank transfer to make it look like I had laundered the $200,000. My hands went cold. My breath locked up. It was public, shared by 3 of my dad's friends already. People I'd grown up calling uncle and aunt. I reported it, took screenshots, and tried to stay calm, but the damage was done. Within 24 hours, my name was trending in the local community forum as that greedy daughter who tried to bankrupt her own father. The shame was unbearable. I couldn't leave the house without wondering who had seen it. I got stares at the grocery store. My Pilates instructor asked, gently, if everything was okay at home. Even my landlord emailed to check in. But the worst part, my brother Adam, my own flesh and blood, messaged me just 2 words. You lost. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just my father acting out of pride or panic. This was a coordinated effort to destroy me. Reputation, finances, career. He was pulling every thread he could reach and using the family to do it. And they believed him. Or at least, they were too scared not to. I felt like I was disappearing. Like the person I used to be, responsible, respected, successful, was being erased from the inside out. And no one was coming to save me. But he had made one mistake. He thought I'd let him finish the job. There's a moment in every nightmare when you stop trying to wake up and you start fighting back. For me, that moment came the night I found an old email draft. Not a sent message, just a draft. It was the original transfer confirmation from when I sent my dad the $200,000, still saved in my inbox, never deleted. Attached to it were screenshots, notes, even a voice memo where I had recorded our conversation the day after. I hadn't meant to record it maliciously. I was just overwhelmed, and I'd started keeping voice notes back then to keep track of everything. One of them captured him saying, "You saved the company, Sonia. I'll pay you back every dime with interest. You'll see." I must have listened to that clip 15 times, my heart pounding louder each time. It was my smoking gun. Proof that I hadn't stolen anything. That he'd asked for the money. That I was the one who had been deceived. I felt like I was standing in the wreckage of a fire, and suddenly I had found the match. That night I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat down and started building a file. I pulled everything. The wire transfer receipts, the emails, the text logs, even social media timestamps showing my dad lying about being out of the country while he was very much not. I tracked the burner account that posted the fake confession and found it was created using a VPN. Sloppy but traceable. I filed another police report, this time armed with evidence. I contacted a cyber forensics firm and paid out of pocket to investigate the IP history of the account. They found that it had been accessed multiple times from a commercial office park, my father's business address. That was when everything changed. The detective assigned to my case finally took me seriously. So did my lawyer, who I'd quietly retained weeks earlier after the credit fraud surfaced. We put together a cease and desist for online defamation, filed a civil suit for damages, and began preparing the case for a potential criminal investigation, identity theft, fraud, and possibly even corporate misconduct. Because here's what my father forgot. He didn't just betray a daughter. He betrayed someone who documents everything. I sent a single email to my dad. Not emotional, not angry, just a PDF attachment labeled Timeline of Events, $200,000 loan, and one line. You have 72 hours to respond before I proceed legally. No response, but I know he read it. I tracked the email open and saw it was viewed 5 times within 2 hours. Then suddenly, the Facebook smear post disappeared. The burner account went dark, and I got a call from a private number. I let it go to voicemail. It was his voice. Calm, controlled, like nothing had happened. "Sonia, we don't need to turn this into something bigger. There's no need to involve lawyers. Let's talk. Family to family." I saved the message. Forwarded it to my attorney. He wanted to talk now, but not out of remorse. Out of fear. Fear that the version of the truth he'd been selling to everyone was about to collapse. And it was. Because for every lie he told, I now had something real. Concrete. Legal. And here's what surprised me most. When I finally had the upper hand, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Like every piece of revenge I had fantasized about couldn't fill the space where my father used to live. But I knew I had to keep going, not to get even, but to get free. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about telling the truth in a room full of people who had been taught to call it betrayal. There's a particular kind of silence that falls right before someone's world falls apart, and I watched it take hold of my father's face across a courtroom just moments before the hearing began. He looked smaller somehow, less like the booming man I grew up with, and more like a figure shrinking under fluorescent lights. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes, and it wasn't the kind you feel when something bad happens. It was the fear of getting caught. The judge's voice barely echoed when the case was called. Civil court, yes, but with a file so thick you'd think we were settling a corporate merger. My lawyer stood, calm, prepared, ice in his veins. He started with a single sentence. Your Honor will be showing that not only was the defendant fully aware of the $200,000 loan from the plaintiff, his daughter, but that he engaged in a deliberate campaign to defame, financially damage, and isolate her in retaliation when she requested repayment. My father looked straight ahead, didn't blink, didn't even glance at me. Maybe because he couldn't, or maybe because he knew the minute he did, I'd see the cracks. We submitted everything. The wire transfers, the audio clip, the metadata proving he accessed the burner account from his office, the IP report, even a notarized statement from a former employee who'd overheard him bragging about how easy it is to turn a whole family against one person. I sat through every second of it, my hands cold but steady, not out of revenge, but survival. Every sentence spoken by my legal team felt like another brick laid down to rebuild my reputation, my future, and my self-worth. Not just in court, but in front of people who had stopped believing me. Because this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about dragging the truth out into the sunlight and letting it burn. When his attorney finally stood, she was flustered, disorganized. I could tell they hadn't expected me to come with a file that deep or a case that tight. They tried to twist the narrative, said it was a gift, not a loan, that I had misunderstood, that family disputes shouldn't be weaponized. But they were flailing, and everyone in the room knew it. The judge didn't make a ruling that day. It was a preliminary hearing, but as we left the courtroom, I felt a shift in gravity. My father didn't say a word, just brushed past me like I was a stranger. His attorney trailed behind, her expression tight and quiet. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. That week, something else happened. My brother, Adam, texted me again. I didn't know. I'm sorry. No excuses. No explanations. Just that. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first crack in the wall he'd helped build around me. Over the next few weeks, the fallout continued. Quiet settlements were offered. His reputation in the business world began to splinter. Mutual acquaintances stopped returning his calls. The silence he'd once used as a weapon against me was now being turned on him. But here's the truth no one tells you. Getting justice doesn't feel like you think it will. There's no music swelling. No parade. Just you, walking out of a building with your name still intact, your sanity still in one piece, and a folder of evidence that proves what everyone said was in your head was in fact real. And that's power. The first time I let myself breathe again, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. The sky was a perfect shade of orange, the kind of color that feels like everything is just right for a moment. It had been months since the trial, since the chaos. My father's name was no longer on the tip of every conversation. His reputation had crumbled, and the business he'd once built had taken a massive hit. And me, I was still here. My name was no longer synonymous with betrayal, but with truth. But if I'm being honest, there were days I didn't know who I was anymore. Not because I had lost everything, but because I had to relearn who I was without him. Without the man I had spent my entire life seeing as my protector, my mentor, my father. The man who had shattered every illusion I'd held about family, about trust. And yet, I had survived. I had survived. The hardest part was the grief. It wasn't the kind of grief you feel when someone dies. It was the kind that comes when someone you thought would always be there, someone you thought you knew better than anyone, becomes a stranger. I mourned the father I had wanted, the father I had hoped existed beneath the lies. I mourned the man I thought was on my side, fighting with me, not against me. But here's the thing about grief. It changes you. It doesn't just break you down. It forces you to rebuild, piece by piece, and it shows you parts of yourself you never knew you had. I found strength in places I didn't even know existed. In the moments when I thought I couldn't take any more, I realized I was already standing taller than I had before. One of the hardest things to accept was how many people in my family chose him over me. They didn't speak to me for months, some even longer. My aunt, who had once been my closest confidant, told me over the phone, "I can't choose sides in this. Your father's done a lot for this family." Her words felt like a slap, but I understood. People don't want to believe that the person they've known their whole life is capable of betrayal. They want to cling to the version of him they've always believed in, no matter how flawed. But I wasn't going to let that be my story. I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite my truth. And the more I reflected, the more I realized I hadn't just been fighting to get my money back. I had been fighting for my dignity, for my future. I had been fighting for the right to say, I am worthy of respect. I am not a victim. The truth didn't just set me free. It built me back into the person I always was, but stronger. It was my therapist who first helped me understand that. You fought a battle, she said one day. But it wasn't with your father. It was with yourself. You chose to stand up, to fight for what was right, even when it felt like everything was stacked against you. And she was right. I found out that, in the end, my father's scheme to destroy me had done the opposite. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. I was thriving. I was healing, step by step. And every day I felt stronger, more sure of myself, more proud of the person I was becoming. Over time, I did what I hadn't thought I could, let go of the anger. It wasn't easy, but anger had been my armor, and there came a point when I realized I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't fighting a war, I was living my life, and I would do it on my terms. No more feeling small, no more questioning my worth. I had faced the worst and emerged with my integrity intact. I was stronger than I had ever been, even before the storm. And then, there was a moment that closed the chapter completely. My father, years after the fallout, when the dust had settled, reached out. A text, simple and to the point. I regret everything. Can we talk? For a brief second, I considered it. I thought about what it would be like to hear his voice again, to finally get the closure I never had. But the truth was, I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to tell me I was right. I had already done the hardest part. I had let go of the dream of him being the father I needed. And now I was free. I deleted the message. And I moved on. In the months that followed, I reclaimed my life. I got my finances back on track, mended my relationships with the people who had supported me through the storm, and started a new chapter. I enrolled in a course I'd always wanted to take. I traveled. I went to therapy and faced every part of myself that I'd been hiding from. I rebuilt my identity, not as a daughter, not as someone's victim, but as me. I'm not the same person I was before my father's betrayal. But then again, I don't want to be. I am who I am because of everything I've endured. And I am proud of it. Because in the end, I found strength I never knew I had, and that strength, it's mine forever.